today we have Daniel from Peec AI, like the Europeans' quickest growing startup. I read on LinkedIn somewhere. And today we have the very, very high interest and high traction topic of GEO. But few things before we actually start. Feel free to just pop your questions into the chat. We can also invite you up here on stage if you want to join the discussion a bit, but also just put it in the chat or the Q&A tool. I'll put that question up to Daniel. We'll also have Paul, which we'll have in a few seconds, which would start. We could just have the whole time to complete that, Paul. That's just for us to do some research. And last but not least, there will be a recording. We will share that afterwards with everyone who has participated, probably 1 or 2 days or something after that. Yeah, that's it from my end. Then I would say, Daniel, the stage is yours.
Awesome, Robert. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm also happy to introduce myself and ourselves quickly before we jump into a very short presentation regarding the state of search. Then doing a quick product walkthrough of what we've built so far and also where we want to go with it, and then leaving enough time for discussion and for questions, because of course the question is debated a lot. Everybody has lots of questions, so I'm very happy to make this a discussion, and I'm of course inviting everyone to be critical and challenge me, so this would be very much appreciated. To introduce myself quickly, so my name is Daniel. I was born and raised in Berlin. I actually have a legal background, so I once studied law here in Berlin, but always was pretty much obsessed with AI and never really wanted to become a lawyer. So I worked for a very small VC fund, then started working to then found my first company, a legal tech startup where we turned layoffs into payoffs. So we had people that got laid off get a severance payment. This is where I got in touch with online marketing and SEO, since of course we had to generate lots of leads in the consumer space. And then last year in December, my 2 co-founders and I, Marius and Tobias, we started to become even more obsessed with the changes happening to search. Pretty much the moment ChatGPT search came out. So ChatGPT was already a thing for quite some time. However, the moment those LLMs got the opportunity to actually search the web, of course, things got a lot more interesting, because now we suddenly had the opportunity to manipulate what is happening in terms of what sources the LLMs are pulling from the web, instead of just hoping to become part of the training data for the next training run of such models. So yeah, we noticed this big platform shift happening. So we decided to start building Peec AI. And what we're doing as a platform is we are measuring your visibility as a company in AI search. So we're helping you understand whether you are showing up for the prompts you would want to show up for. And most importantly, we're helping you understand what the different sources are, so the different sites that the models are taking into account to create a narrative around certain products, product categories, your own brand, but also your competition. So this is pretty much what we're doing in a nutshell. And we've been quite successful so far with it, simply because we had very good timing, I would say, because we just started building this the moment the topic got a lot of hype, and also the moment people started getting more and more referral traffic out of those models. So yeah, we just closed our seed financing round, and we raised a total of 7 million euros. So we now actually got a very good shot against the companies from the States that are doing something similar. So we're really trying to execute this through and go from being an analytics tool to a tool that actually also helps you improve your visibility, etc. But I'm very happy to jump into the tool in a second. I'm going to start with sharing my screen now and giving you a quick overview before we dive a bit deeper. In between, I'm always going to check the chat and look for your questions. So far, I don't see any, I think. So I'm just gonna start with our quick little presentation to tell you a bit about the state of search. So everybody here pretty much, is on the same level. So Robert, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. Go ahead.
Awesome. So yeah, Peec AI, as I've said, we are a company that helps you understand how visible you are in AI search. And why that is important is because the way consumers, or pretty much everyone right now, how they search is changing quite a lot. And the main reason for that is that AI often just gives you a better search experience. I wouldn't say this is true for everything that you might be searching for. If you would be doing a branded search, then of course, Google with its massive speeds and us being used to it, of course, will give you the better search experience. However, when we are looking at topics that are a bit more research intense, where you actually want to go deep, where you would want to see a personalized answer, such as areas like travel or finance or buying software or buying products that are a bit more expensive. We're doing lots of comparisons before you buy or before you reach out, where you have maybe a bit of a longer user journey and are not doing impulse buys. For those cases, AI actually gives us a much better search experience. We're getting an instant answer and everything becomes much more of a conversation. So naturally, with the adoption of AI and LLMs getting better and better, people are starting to search differently. To be fair, we are still at the beginning, but when you're looking at the numbers, so how the growth actually looks, then you can see that this is actually serious. I know that a few years ago, there was like a very big hype around voice search, for example, that never really picked up. But if you're comparing the numbers, voice search versus AI search, then you can actually see, all right, something is happening right here, and people are actually searching differently. Anecdotally, I think everyone here in this room will know this from its own behavior. And then, of course, there are also the numbers you can look at that really prove what is happening right now. And what is happening right now is that search is becoming more conversational, and that we are now getting not only on ChatGPT but also in the classical world of Google an instant response. And this is quite impactful because it pretty much changes the whole dynamic of how we're getting information compared to how we've gotten information before. And the main thing is that people aren't that much inclined anymore to click on a response or click on a link simply because they instantly got the response. And this pretty much, with the rollout of AI overviews, led to quite the big reduction in clicks, simply because for pretty much every informational search, but also now more and more transactional and commercial queries, you're instantly getting the response. You don't have to click on the site anymore because you pretty much got everything you needed fulfilled by that summary of text. And the interesting thing about AI search, however, is when you are getting a click. So when people are then, getting the answer and clicking on the site, because it wasn't an informational query, for example, it was about, finding or comparing a product, then that traffic is very high intent, because people actually went in and got through this highly personalized, often conversation where they really got to the response they were looking for. And when they are now clicking on a site that got pulled in as a source, what we can see is that we have much higher conversion rates. And this is happening right now. So the referral traffic out of AI models is actually increasing quite a lot. This is pretty much what we can see with every one of our clients. To be again transparent, we're seeing some industries where this is really exploding. So especially software, especially travel, some areas in e-commerce, where this is really growing. And this is pretty much the first sign that this will also spread out to different industries. For other areas, you sometimes see a very low referral growth. And then sometimes you will also have outliers where you wouldn't really have expected it. For example, we have one client that is that is a pretty classic, German Mittelständler, and they are doing something very specific in manufacturing, and they, for example, also get a very high growth in terms of referral traffic. So this is really exciting, especially that the traffic is pretty much worth even more since we're getting higher conversions from it. And then the main question right now, of course, is, hey, how similar is this to classical SEO, or how do I even optimize for AI search? And what we're seeing, and now I want to maybe give you a very quick explanation on how AI search even works, is that you always have an overlap with classical SEO, but that it is not the same. So to give you some context right here, how, for example, ChatGPT search works when a user is putting in a query is the following. So I am a user and I am, for example, looking for the best running shoes. And if I'm putting into ChatGPT what are the best running shoes, then ChatGPT will notice, hey, this user is looking for recent information. And that recent information maybe isn't part of my training data right now. So in order to give that user a great response, what I will do is I will go and search the web. And in order to search the web, OpenAI or ChatGPT will then be querying an index. And this index might be the Bing index, this might be Google, this might be Brave, this might be DuckDuckGo, this might be any index of any search engine. And ChatGPT will then take my prompt and turn it into different keywords or different little subqueries, run those queries against the models, get, for example, the top 30, 50, or even 150 pages, and it will then understand the content of those pages in order to give you a response in a condensed form. And what you will see as content within that response is the exact content that you are getting from those sites. And now the interesting thing is, of course, or the interesting question, if a ChatGPT is querying the index, all I have to do is be good in traditional SEO, and then I will also appear in the responses. And this is only partly true. One thing that is 100% sure is that if you are great at SEO, you also have great chances of appearing in AI search results. However, what we're always seeing, and this is now the interesting part, is that there are a lot of outliers or a lot of outlier sites that appear in the result as a source without being one of the top 3, 5, or even 10 Google results that you're seeing. And this is pretty much what is changing the game, that you now have the chance of appearing within an AI answer with your content without even being visible to the traditional Google user, because maybe your content is on page 2 or 3, but your content might be in a special way resonating more with what the LLM wants to see than what we're seeing on the top 3 results, and therefore you are getting that visibility. And what statistics show is that only 12% of the Google SERPs actually overlap with the ChatGPT results, which is quite interesting. Reason 1 for that is that you have OpenAI querying a different index, Bing index very likely. However, this is also not 100% sure anymore, because we can also see Google-specific data or Google-specific URL parameters showing up in the sources of of ChatGPT. However, we know that OpenAI works with Microsoft, so this, of course, is one indication. In general, I think the main thing to understand here is that they do not overlap as much. So it is pretty much partly a completely new game. And this is in the end the main point. So I'm very happy to jump quickly to the other screen and then look at the questions that we got here in the chat. And also I want to pause here real quick and give you the opportunity to ask questions before I jump into the tool a bit and show you what we've built so far and also show you where we want to go with it.
Thanks for the overview. While you keep working on the screen share, I'll pester you with some questions like came to my mind. So what do you see at customers, how geo impacts their traffic? I mean, AI overviews have been rolled out basically worldwide now somehow, and then they capture a lot of questions and some do not. So basically everyone is using generative engines now by just using Google. So what's the impact that you see?
Good question. So this is pretty much dependent or differently from customer to customer, but for some clients that did a lot of informational content before. So imagine, a company that sells food boxes or that sells food that have like a very big blog that is about, different recipe ideas for companies as such. We are seeing often a harsh decline in traffic simply because what users can get with AI answers is pretty much eating up all of this. Because if I'm putting in a query into Google where I'm asking, for example, about a specific recipe, then I will often get an AI overview, or I won't even use Google anymore and just, put in what I got in my fridge into ChatGPT and then get a personalized recipe out. And this is also the case for lots of different informational content. So especially for informational content, for blog posts, we're seeing quite the harsh decline in traffic. So this is the one thing that we're seeing in terms of AI search. But then for content that is very much, very, very deep in the funnel, where you're responding to very specific questions, for example, regarding to integrations that your software platform offers, or documentation regarding software, there we can actually see an increase in traffic because people are going deep, asking questions already very deep in the funnel, and they are then inclined to go even deeper, and they then actually tend to click on those sources. So it's quite different. Generally, we're seeing less traffic. However, you often also have cases where people suddenly getting that increase in referral traffic out of LLMs.
No, and to comment on that, what I've seen in a discussion with one of our customers was that they from a publishing context a bit, I would say, or at least in the sports sector, they see a decline in traffic, but the leftover traffic has a higher intent and higher conversion rate done into the business model. So there's this like the first glance of stuff is happening on the search. I mean, that's basically the idea, like you mentioned, and then they still get the same amount of conversions out of it in total. But the question, of course, is how that will change over the next decade or weeks or so. But up to you. Let's have a look at Peec AI and let's see what you're able to do.
By the way, I think it's a very good point. What you just mentioned, right? What is it actually even about? Is it about traffic or is it about conversions? And of course, it is ultimately about conversions. So it is ultimately about generating revenue. And if your traffic in general might be declining, but instead you are getting more traffic with a higher intent that converts better, I think this is ultimately what you should be looking at. And then another question, since you mentioned publishers or another topic, I think for publishers, it can also be quite interesting to be only pulled in as a source from an LLM versus actually getting the click. Because if I am a publisher, for example, it can also be about shaping the narrative for me. So if I'm, for example, a news publisher, and for me it is about, you know, bringing news out, and I get cited a lot as a source by the LLMs. This, of course, also is a win, because somebody might click on my site or might not click on my site, but what I did is I was pulled in, and I pretty much shaped the narrative, so I got my information out, even though I didn't get a click. So this is also a very interesting case. For some companies, it is also more about being visible as a source without getting the clicks. But then, of course, ultimately, what we want is revenue, or what we want are the conversions. Awesome. So I'm very happy to jump into our tool Peec AI and give you a very quick overview. I got a demo workspace right here for Expedia, so big company from the travel sector. And I will share my tab right here quickly, and I hope everybody is able to see it. And I can show you what we are able to do with the tool. So what you see right here is the Peec AI platform. And what we're doing is we're helping you understand how visible you are in AI search as a brand, but also as a source. And how we're doing this is by running a set of prompts that you would want to appear for as a brand, so very similar to keywords, and also prompts where you'd want to find out, are my competitors visible? And we're running those against ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Google AI overviews by default. And we also always give our users the possibility to tap into other models. However, to be very fair, ChatGPT is pretty much synonymous for AI search, and therefore the most important classical AI model. And then, of course, we also have the AI overviews. And together with Perplexity, you're pretty much covering about 95% of overall market share. There are also always other models that are now gaining ground, such as Claude, also Gemini in general, and also Copilot, and also the AI mode will soon go live in Europe. But with those three models, you're pretty much getting a very great base. And what we do is we are essentially running the prompts against those models on a daily basis. And the reason why we're running the prompts on a daily basis is quite important. And that is that the AI models are inherently random, meaning that if I am running the prompt searching for flights to Houston, for example, against ChatGPT once, twice, 3 times, etc., I will always get a different result. So if you compare it to rank tracking in Google, where you can sometimes only run a keyword on a bi-weekly basis, for example, or in much bigger intervals, when it's about AI search, you actually want as much data as possible, simply to get to that statistically significant amount of data that will allow you to make a statement on your visibility. But I'm happy to go a bit deeper and show you this with a concrete example. So if we want to understand how the tool works, it makes sense to zoom in a little bit. So what we got here is pretty much where the data is coming from. And this is from the different prompts. And if I'm looking at one of those prompts right here that might be interesting for Expedia, such as on which app can I book Boston hotels, or best website for booking a hotel, you can see what is going on under the hood. So what we're doing is we're essentially running those prompts against the different models on a daily basis, and we're getting responses from Perplexity, also ChatGPT, and also from AI overviews. And if I'm, for example, picking ChatGPT here as a model, you can see that the results are similar, but they are not always the same. And this is what I meant with randomness of the AI models. So you can see that sometimes Booking.com, Hotels.com, and Agoda will be the top 3 sites, and then Booking.com, Expedia, and Airbnb will be the top sites. And then Booking, Airbnb, and Expedia in a different order will be the top sites. So in order to get a solid statement on your visibility, it makes sense to run the prompts on a day-to-day basis, and then think about visibility like a probability of appearing for a certain prompt within a given time frame. So if Expedia is appearing in 60% of all the responses we generated in the last 7 days, Expedia has a visibility of 60%. Booking.com, since they are pretty much, omnipresent, they're actually appearing in every prompt alongside hotels.com. For Kayak and Trivago, this is almost the case, but not always the case. So this is pretty much how we're measuring your visibility for a certain prompt. The next two metrics are sentiment and position. So when it comes to sentiment, this is pretty straightforward. We are looking at the responses, and then we're looking at the different brands. And what we're doing is we're chunking the text. And if we got Kayak here, and Kayak is associated with being a powerful aggregator, searching hundreds of travel sites, etc., then this will get a rather positive sentiment. If you would see words associated with a brand that are rather neutral or negative, then we would see a number that is between 0 and 50. If we're talking positive about a brand, this will be between 50 and 100. And this can be very interesting in order to detect, for example, outliers, or to detect models that talk about your brand in not super positive ways. If you're talking about the best websites for booking a hotel, obviously most of the responses will be positive. But if you're asking more general, there's lots of exciting things to discover. And then, of course, you can actually drill deep and find out where that bad sentiment is coming from. But more on that in a second when we're talking about sources. Another thing we're doing that is a bit more of, like a legacy SEO metric is looking at the position. So we're telling you when you are mentioned as a brand, where are you then mentioned position-wise? And for Booking.com, this again can be a way of benchmarking against competitors, because Booking and Hotels.com both got 100% visibility right here. However, Booking is on average at a higher position than Hotels.com. And this is something you can also see here, that Booking actually pretty much always gets the #1 spot.
Does that make a difference? Do you have information that does how much traffic that gets, how humans actually read and interact with that?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So one thing we can tell is that, of course, it's not as harsh as in the world of Google, because in the world of Google, of course, you really want to be #1, #2, or #3. Anything below that really gets difficult. However, when we're talking about AI search, I think psychologically, of course, being #1 or being at the top of such list right here will have an impact on the users. However, I do not think it matters that much, simply because people will usually read at least the top part of a response, or will pretty much read all parts of a response. So I think it is important, or it can be important, but it's definitely not as important as in the world of Google. The responses also tend to be different. So sometimes you will get something that resembles, that ordered list, but sometimes you will also see brands next to each other in the response. And for those cases, I think it matters much less. Awesome.
We actually get a question from the audience.
Nice.
The question is, does the repetition of these prompts by your bot affect the results in any way?
Yeah. Cool, Alessandra, thank you so much for the question. So we really are taking care to not run into issues such as, caching or personalization, because if you were to run the prompts, on a daily basis with the same account, with the same IP address, and then of course, after some time, the model would just, cache you and give you the same response over and over again. So what we're doing when we're scraping, for example, ChatGPT, we are using a pool of different IP addresses that we're rotating. And whenever our bots go to visit the site, we open a new tab in incognito mode, and then afterwards close that tab forever. So we get the information as neutral as possible. So the answer is a no, it does not affect the results in any way. Awesome. So very, very happy to talk a bit more about the topic of sources, which is pretty much the most important metric that we're looking at. So if we're looking at the structure of such a response, you can see that we're asked for the best website for booking a hotel. And what we're getting here is different brand mentions. And those brand mentions we're not getting because the model pulled the data from its internal, knowledge treasure. It's rather because the data was pulled from the websites. that the model looked at in order to generate that response. So everything you're seeing here is actually only mentioned because it was also mentioned on those sites. And what we help you understand, and what is also the key to understanding what is going on over time in AI search, is for a specific prompt or for an aggregation of prompts, what are the sites that get pulled in as a source over and over again? So this is the number one metric. And then the other question, which is especially interesting, is if my site, now we're looking here at frommas.com, is being pulled in as a source, how often is it then cited in the text concretely? And this is quite important because being cited in the text means that the likelihood of getting a click actually increases quite a lot, because you will also often see sources that are, part of that listicle here on the side, but they do not even get a citation in the text, or they only get cited once. So you can see, for example, that Trivago here is getting 1 citation, whereas TripAdvisor is getting 1, 2, 3, and frommas.com is also getting 3. So if you're looking at our data, we're showing you very detailed what the top domains are that get pulled in to generate such a response. So kayak.com, for example, was used as a source in 90% of all the responses we generated for that prompt. And when it was used as a source, it was on average cited 3.2 times in the response, which is quite interesting because this really tells us a lot about the quality of a source in the eyes of the AI model, because some sources get a very low number of average citations, so even a number below 1, whereas some others get a very high number of average citations. And what we're doing here with the sources is we're classifying them. So we're telling you, are they competitors of yours? Is it UGC? Is it editorial content, etc.? And then we're allowing you to look at the domain level, but we also allow you to look at the URL level. So here you can go quite deeper and really look at the top or like best performing URLs for that prompt. And here, for example, we got a site by frommas.com where they're talking about the best and worst hotel booking sites for 2025. Or a site by TripAdvisor where they're talking about the most reliable hotel booking sites. So one interesting thing that we're seeing in AI search is that next to classic on-page optimizations, off-page also plays quite the big role, because AI models tend to trust publishers and editorial content quite a lot. Comparison sites we're also seeing, so being mentioned on one of those sites, especially if you know that this site is getting pulled in as a source over and over again, can yield very quick results by just trying to get mentioned on that site. And what we're then here doing is we're scraping those sites and telling you, are you mentioned here as a brand, or are you not mentioned, etc. So this is pretty much what we're doing in a nutshell. And I'm very happy to zoom out a bit now and show you about clustering the prompts into topics. And also how the dashboard works. But again, I'm going to pause here real quick and give you the opportunity to ask questions. Robert, I don't know whether you have one.
I have one.
Nice.
You probably did, but how does that in the sources compare to the sources for classic SEO? I mean, basically the principles, backlinks, quotations are kind of similar. So I would expect there is maybe overlapping and none, but what's your take on that? And second part of that question, do you find extreme outliers, and which are those?
Yeah, this is a very cool question. So for that, let's maybe look at all the sources and aggregation relative to all the prompts we tracked here. So right now we just looked at the single prompt. But if I'm clicking on sources right here, I can actually see the top sources of my industry relative to all the responses we generated for that account, and we generated quite a lot. And the main thing that we're noticing, if you're asking about this, is that the models actually behave totally different. So if you're looking at the top sources of ChatGPT, you can see, for example, that Reddit is the number 1 source, Wikipedia is number 3, Wikipedia is number 2, Expedia is number 3, etc. And if you're then looking at the top Perplexity sources, you won't, for example, see any Reddit and Wikipedia anymore, and you will see Kayak and TripAdvisor at the number 1 and 2 positions. You will also see some YouTube here. And if you're then looking at AI overviews, you will see Reddit again, but also some other sites popping up. So what we can see, especially if you're comparing the results to Google, is that obviously AI overviews are what is closest to Google in terms of overlap. After this, we will see Perplexity. And when it comes to ChatGPT, this is where we've seen the weirdest outliers and the most stuff happening as well. So the one graph or the one thing I showed before in the presentation was that ChatGPT and Google results actually only overlap 12%. And then for the others, this gets closer and closer. And when we're talking about outliers, we've seen a lot happening in ChatGPT. So the main thing that you have to understand that AI search is pretty much something that is only at the beginning. So what is happening between the different model providers is that they are all tweaking their algorithms and trying out a lot. So when we looked at the sources from ChatGPT a few months ago, they looked very different from what they are looking like now. So now we suddenly are getting a lot of Reddit within the ChatGPT sources, whereas we didn't see a lot of Reddit in the ChatGPT sources a few months ago. So this is quite the recent change. Another thing we've been seeing is that ChatGPT has been boosting Wikipedia as a source sometimes for 2 weeks, and then the visibility of Wikipedia declined very sharply again. So it's all very dynamic as of right now, and you see lots of changes. We've also even seen some very spammy looking sites in the sources of ChatGPT for some industries. So, classical AI slop in the sense that you're just, generating 100,000 of articles and try to rank somewhere. And ChatGPT was actually trusting that content, but this we've seen declining. So ChatGPT is actually working on getting their search much better. This is also one of the reasons why I really like looking at our tool, and I'm very happy to show another account real quick where we have collected much more data about a certain industry. So I'm going to switch here real quick and show you an account where I've been collecting data pretty much since beginning of the year.
Okay, while you do that, for the audience, since we normally usually go for 45 minutes or something for all the audience, post your questions now so we can start on the discussion part a bit. Go ahead, Daniel.
Please. Yes. So this right here, this spike that you've seen in March is very interesting. So this is ChatGPT or OpenAI actually boosting Wikipedia as a source very strongly for 2 weeks, and then pretty much stopping altogether, and then Wikipedia becoming a bit more of a normally represented source amongst the data. But what you can see in general, if you're looking at that data over time, that it is quite volatile, which is of course one reason due to the models being inherently random, but also due to the models actually experimenting with their own ranking factors and seeing what configuration is giving the best experience to the user. Because of course, this is what it's about in the end. If you want to win the AI search war, I'm going to say right now. So of course, you have to build the best search in order to capture the most users. So since they are competing that hard, we're seeing a lot of stuff happening, which also makes the tracking over time so interesting, because you can actually see the things the platforms are trying out maybe before other companies are seeing it, and then learning from the data and incorporating it.
Yeah, I mean, this was the argument. I just saw that in your slide deck earlier. This is a big opportunity for people to catch market share now, right? Because you can be part of this. It's a quick moving space like SEO was 20 years ago. And if you are active now and do the right thing, you can actually invest for the next 10 years or something, maybe. Yeah.
100%.
Question for you is, what do you expect to change over the next, I would say, the last thing I would have said years, but maybe go down to months or even weeks. So what do you expect to change over the next 8 weeks?
Yeah, I think, making a prediction for a year or even 2 is very hard. So there are some things where we are quite sure. So one thing everybody is talking about quite a lot is, ads. I think we won't see ads very soon in ChatGPT. They have to be very careful with it. But of course, it's, the core part of Google's business model. So I'm quite sure that we will see, first of all, the AI mode also in Europe, and that we will see, you know, ads in AI mode and in general, more ads in the AI answers that Google is giving us. This is one thing that is very interesting that we're looking at. Then a bit of a, you know, more long-term prediction is the whole agentic wave, or pretty much a much deeper integration of the different systems we're looking at right now. So imagine, you know, users being able to directly, you know, check out within ChatGPT, on top of ChatGPT shopping. This is one interesting thing. Or users being able to directly book a flight within ChatGPT. We're seeing lots of experiments done, especially by Google, but also, of course, by OpenAI, that pretty much already have ChatGPT shopping live, and they're talking a lot about it. They even talked about a revenue sharing model where the different sellers work together with them. They get a cut of their revenue. So I think this is something that the model providers are actually doubling down on. ChatGPT, they also have a big incentive of becoming, or they actually have to become profitable because they raised so much money. So when we're talking about making profits, as for example OpenAI, then this is something that is quite close or quite likely to happen. So I think we will see more involvement in that space.
Yeah, I do agree. I also, my personal opinion on that is that we will see the same thing that we just saw for SEA versus SEO. There will be both. You will have organic and paid stuff, and it will kind of like, you need to look at both pillars, even if you're exceptional in one or something. But that's my personal opinion. So, we've actually got a question from the audience. So question is,
Nice.
do prompts have the same impact on the search result at ChatGPT, like the W-Fragen in Google? So basically, turn it around, does it make sense to just use those most used prompt as website content? Basically giving the chunks that you want to have answered already in there?
Okay, I'm reading the question again. Yeah, so what we're seeing is that this can definitely make sense, simply because the models are always kind of, you know, matching what they're finding on the website versus what you put in the prompts. And the higher the overlap, we've actually seen also the higher amount of citations you will be getting. Robert, I bet, has also like a very good take regarding this. But what we've seen work is actually, you know, adding FAQs to your website and pretty much putting in related question to your W-Frage or to your question, follow-up questions, etc. So the model, when it is, you know, searching the web after you put in your prompt, is pretty much finding all those answers very closely to the prompt you already put in, alongside possible follow-up questions. So this is definitely a yes. However,
Yeah,
maybe
I do agree, but I've also think it's on a more meta thing, thinking about what's the user intent, what they want to know, and phrase that as easily as possible for a dumb machine to understand is always a good thing. Yeah, and FAQs are a good thing to hide a lot of repetitive content on the page. Yeah, or basically just rephrase it for other audiences also. Yeah, and the second question that we have, and I hope Sandra, we answered your question. If not, speak up. On the second question is that we have is, how does classical conversion optimization has to change from SEO to GEO?
So how does classical conversion optimization via SEO have to change for you? I think I understand this as a bit more of like a general question in terms of what you can actually do to drive the traffic and ultimately conversions. So what we are seeing is that there are pretty much, you know, two ways of doing it. The one that is the quickest is just trying to be as broadly represented on the sources that are most impactful to your industry or most impactful to the topics. Because what we've generally have been seeing is that models are pulling from a quite broad range of sources. So it will be not only your own site, but it will also be lots of user-generated content. It will also be lots of comparison sites, etc. So this is the one thing. And then the other thing, when it comes to what you can do on your own site, then this pretty much, touches a bit the question that Sandra wants, or that Sandra just had, is that you pretty much want to be as close as possible to the answer that the LLM wants to give the user in a similar structure to the query that the user might have. So the content should be, in a bit more of a bits and pieces form, where you have, lots of different subcategories where you're working with, like pretty much follow-up questions, where all the content is in a format that is very much machine digestible or LLM digestible, where you're looking at fluidity of the content. So there are actually some papers out there, or there's one big paper out there that is called Generative Engine Optimization that actually coined the term. And I would recommend to have a look at this if you want to look at how you actually write for the AI. But Robert, I know that you also again have a take regarding this.
Yeah, we also did 2 meetups in the sessions a few weeks ago, and the recordings are online. So that's something to just share again. Short summary is LLMs love text and written copy. So written content is kind of like content is king again. That's a very short summary, and of course different types. I mean, you mentioned that earlier when you said magazine style type of content or informational type of content gets high visibility by for example, being quoted or cited in a recipe, but it goes low clicks. So it's back down to a mixture of content then again, right? You have to have both. So next question that we have is, how do you analyze the traffic that you actually do get from AI search?
Good. Again, a good question. So we also want to make this possible with our tool very soon. For now, what our users are doing is they are looking at their GA4, putting in a regular expression, and pretty much capturing all the different LLMs that they can get traffic from. So of course, starting with the biggest one with ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Copilot, etc. And then pretty much finding that configuration in GA4. It is a bit tedious, and also not everybody is using GA4, but this is one of the steps. And then another thing that I can really recommend to anyone is adding a self-attribution field somewhere within the checkout funnel on your site, where users can just put in, where you're asking users the question, hey, where have you heard about us? And AI search actually is an option. Because what we're seeing in user journeys is that they are, of course, and this is nothing new, quite complex. And when it comes to AI search, what we're seeing is that people are, for example, starting their journey on ChatGPT or starting to compare on ChatGPT, and then they're switching to Google, for example. So the classical referrer traffic on your site will not always give you the results you would want. So adding like another data source where users can actually put in where they heard about you can give you an even clearer picture. And a very cool thing that we've seen from our users is that if somebody is putting in, we've heard about you on ChatGPT, that they are then even asking another question. And that question is, hey, what prompts did you actually put in
of course.
to find us? So this can be another great data source, but of course it's a bit more of a long game.
Yeah. So answer the same. You have referrals, then you get back to the problem of what do I do as an attribution model, and then you also lose data in there. But I think referral traffic is a good way to check, at least also in terms of what are you gaining, and as earlier mentioned, also track allows you a bit to track, of course, with a kind of like a margin of error, but allows you to track how valuable is that compared to others. And last question, I would say, and I will close the session, is good question for Philip. Given a given budget for 2 years, would you recommend to create high quantity of AI generated content, or invest in a low amount of quantity but premium handmade content?
Yeah, this is a This is a very, very interesting question. So I would, in general, say quality always wins. Going for a high quantity is something that we are actually also sometimes seeing when we're looking at accounts that get a high number of citations, and we can see that for now this actually seems to be working to just pretty much spam and produce lots of low quality content. However, I don't really think that this is sustainable as usual, because of course, if one person or like a few companies are doing it and it's working, then after a while everybody will be doing it, and then of course the cat and mouse game will begin, where the content where you have like large amounts with lower quality will just get punished. And in general, since we a bit talked about having that top of funnel content versus content that goes a bit more deep, and where users actually get the response to the question, where they actually get all the information they need in a very deep and nuanced way. This of course will win, because this is providing something new and this is providing value. And the AI models will be very easily be able to give you a very quick and easy response for the top of funnel content. However, everything that is bottom of funnel that really answers or that really solves the problem that your users or that your potential buyers might be having, this will ultimately win. So I would actually say option B is the way. That's all the way.
Well,
I
totally agree. Yeah, definitely. This is something that we have seen with Google of the last 20 years. It's always about the user, the value to the user. Every piece of content has to be put to the test of real world. There will be shortcuts in between. I agree, cat and mouse game, other black hat SEO tricks. This will also work for, actually, I've seen such an example for GEO, where someone just cloned the website with a few thousand products, just a few hundred times, different logo, different domain, and got quite some impact. But this stopped working then. So this will be cat and mouse game, and you will always run behind. But on the other hand, valuable content is independent actually how it is created. If it's AI generated or user handwritten on a typewriter or something, that's not the issue. The production mechanism, but rather does it bring value to the end user, and can you actually do that? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Then we're nearly closing time. So thank you, Daniel, for your time. Good luck with the startup. And thanks for the insights. And happy to have you on stage again in a few months. We'll probably look at that. And I can share the polls, and we'll also share the recording after that.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Robert, thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.